Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood outside Chicago, my life felt simple and predictable. My dad, Tom, spent 30 years working on the police force before retiring, and my mom, Sarah, has been a secretary at Lincoln Elementary for as long as I can remember. They gave me everything they could, but we never had much money. I'm Tasha Mitchell, or at least I was before I became Tasha Reynolds. After college, I earned an accounting degree and landed a job at Anderson & Partners, a mid-sized firm. The pay was decent, the work steady, and I thought that would be my life. Wake up, go to work, come home, and repeat. But that all changed one rainy Tuesday in October when I literally bumped into Marcus outside Starbucks. I was rushing for my morning coffee before work and he was headed to some important meeting. My coffee splashed all over his expensive suit, and I could have crawled into a hole right then and there. "I'm so sorry," I said, frantically dabbing at his jacket with napkins. "I'll pay for the dry cleaning, I swear." Instead of getting mad, he laughed. "Don't worry about it, but you could make it up to me by having dinner with me tonight." One dinner turned into several, and Marcus was unlike anyone I'd ever dated. He was the son of James and Victoria Reynolds, owners of Reynolds Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the Midwest. But Marcus never made me feel beneath him. He loved that I came from a real family, as he put it. Then came the day I met his parents at their mansion in Lake Forest. I'll never forget the way Victoria looked at me, like I was something stuck to her shoe. "So Tasha," she said, swirling her wine glass, "Marcus tells us you're an accountant." "Yes, I am," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "How practical," she said, her smile as thin as her tone. "When I told her about my dad being a retired cop and my mom a school secretary, you think I'd confess they were criminals." James barely spoke to me during dinner, only addressing Marcus about work. 3 months later, when Marcus proposed, I said yes without hesitation, convinced I could win over his parents with time. I thought love would be enough. After our honeymoon in Bali, Marcus and I moved into his luxury apartment in downtown Chicago. The place was bigger than my parents' entire house, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It felt like I was living in a dream. 2 months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Marcus was over the moon, spinning me around our enormous living room when I told him. Even Victoria and James softened a bit. The Victoria couldn't help but remark, "Well, at least the child will have good breeding on one side." Our son, James Jr., or JJ as we called him, was born on a snowy December morning. The moment I held him, nothing else mattered. Not Victoria's constant criticisms, not the whispers at Reynolds Industries about the accountant who married the boss's son. JJ was perfect. The first 2 years of parenthood were good. Marcus was a natural with JJ, coming home early to play with him, reading him bedtime stories, and taking us both to the park on weekends. Marcus thrived as the financial director at Reynolds, and I worked part-time from home as an accountant while taking care of JJ in our home. Victoria and James might not have liked me, but they showered their grandson with expensive gifts and insisted on regular visits. But something shifted around Jay's 3rd birthday. Marcus began coming home later and later, always with the same excuse: "Big project at work, honey." You wouldn't understand. The man who once rushed home to see his son now barely made it in time for bedtime. Then came that Thursday when Victoria showed up unannounced at our apartment, her air scarf perfectly arranged despite the wind. "Would you care to explain," she said, walking in without waiting for an invitation, "why you weren't at the company's annual gala last night?" Confused, I stared at her. "What gala?" "Don't play dumb, Tasha," she said, her eyes narrowing. "The Reynolds Industries anniversary gala. Every executive and their wife was there, except you." My stomach sank. I didn't know about any gala. Victoria's eyes narrowed further. "Marcus said you weren't feeling well." "Are you telling me my son lied?" she asked, her voice growing sharp. That night, I waited up until Marcus came home at 11:30 p.m. He loosened his tie as he walked in, stopping short when he saw me sitting in the dark living room. "Why didn't you tell me about the gala?" I asked quietly. He sighed, pouring himself a scotch. "Look, Tasha, let's be honest. You wouldn't have fit in. The other wives know how to carry themselves. They discuss art, wine, summer homes in the Hamptons. What would you have talked about? Your dad's police stories? Your mom's work in the cafeteria?" His words felt like a slap in the face. "I'm your wife, Marcus. You're supposed to be proud of me, not ashamed." "I was proud of you when we were dating," he replied. but I'm the financial director now. I need a wife who can be more. I went to bed crying that night, telling myself it was just work stress, that things would get better. But deep down, I knew something had broken between us, something I wasn't sure could be fixed. It was a Tuesday when my world fell apart. Marcus texted that he was working late again, and I was cleaning around the apartment when I came across his open laptop on his desk. I'd never snooped before, but something about the screen caught my eye. I sat down at his desk, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. An email thread with someone named Sophia Laurent. My hand shook as I read their messages. Hundreds of them, dating back months. Sophia had been hired a year ago as a new marketing executive at Reynolds. They spoke about me like I was a joke, the simple-minded wife who had no idea what was going on. There were pictures of jewelry Marcus bought her, weekend trips he took with her while telling me he was at business conferences. I stayed up all night, copying everything to a USB drive, printing key emails, taking screenshots. When Marcus came home at 7 a.m., his shirt wrinkled and tie loose, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the evidence spread out in front of me. Care to explain? I asked quietly, holding up one of the printed emails. He laughed, as if it was a casual conversation. Come on, Tasha. Did you really think you were enough? Sophia is everything you're not. Sophisticated, sexy, exciting. When's the last time you even tried to look good for me? I've been taking care of our son while you've been screwing around, I shouted. Marcus poured himself a coffee like we were talking about the weather. Here's how this is going to work. You'll stay my wife on paper. It's better for my image at the company. Sophia understands. And hey, he added with a nasty grin, maybe I'll even find time for you occasionally, if you're lucky. Tears blurred my vision as I grabbed JJ's backpack, stuffing clothes inside. JJ was still asleep, clutching his favorite teddy bear. I gently woke him. Baby, we're going to visit Grandma and Grandpa for a while, okay? Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching us. You'll be back. Where else could you possibly go? I walked past him, taking my son and my purse, along with the USB drive, and didn't say another word. By the time we reached my parents' house, I was a mess. Mom opened the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. 3 days later, the divorce papers arrived. Victoria Reynolds personally delivered them, wearing the smug smirk. I always knew you weren't good enough for my son, she said, handing me the envelope. I'm just glad he finally realized it too. But the worst was yet to come. Marcus wasn't just filing for divorce, he was suing for full custody of JJ. His lawyer filed papers claiming. During the first hearing, Marcus's lawyer painted a picture of me that was far from the truth. Mrs. Reynolds has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past year, he argued. She drinks excessively, creates unwarranted scenes of jealousy, and has become unstable. Fortunately, I had been smart enough to gather evidence. When my lawyer presented the email exchanges between Marcus and Sophia, revealing his affair and cruel remarks about me, the judge's demeanor shifted. The timestamps on those emails proved I wasn't the one causing drama. I hadn't even known about the affair until I discovered those messages. The judge turned to Marcus. Mr. Reynolds, you claim your wife is unstable, yet these emails show you were the one deceiving and gaslighting her. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit as the judge awarded me primary custody of JJ, with Marcus receiving visitation every other weekend and a substantial child support obligation. I returned to my full-time job at the accounting firm, while my parents, without a second thought, stepped in to help care for JJ during their retirement. They were amazing, never once complaining as they embraced their new role as full-time grandparents. Life settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, peaceful, and fulfilling. Then, one Saturday morning, everything changed. A black Range Rover pulled up in front of my parents' modest house. Marcus stepped out, followed by Sophia, tall, blonde, and clad in designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I'm here to see my son, Marcus announced, pushing past me as if he owned the place. Sophia wrinkled her nose and looked around the room. Oh my God, she laughed, picking up one of Mom's cherished family photos. This place is literally a dump, like an actual kennel. Watch your mouth, I snapped. Turning to Marcus, she said, Baby, you can't let your son stay in this hovel. And these old people. She gestured toward my parents, who stood frozen in the doorway. They belong in a ditch somewhere, not raising the Reynolds heir. Get out, I seethed, my body trembling with rage. Both of you, get out of my parents' house now. Marcus sneered at me. Or what? You think you've won in court? Just wait. I shoved them both toward the door. Get out. And Adele. Sophia purred to Marcus. This place probably has fleas anyway. As they drove away, I stood there, shaking, before pulling my parents into a tight hug. Mom was crying, and Dad looked like he wanted to punch something. But as that Range Rover disappeared down the street, a sense of calm settled over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, furious even. The next night, Dad found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of coffee. You know, sweetheart, he said, sitting down across from me, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. I raised an eyebrow. Remember Mike Sullivan? He worked with me on the force. Now he's a private investigator, real thorough, knows how to dig without leaving a trace. I thought about Sophia's smug face, her cruel words, and the nasty emails she kept sending me. Just that morning she commented on my LinkedIn profile, "Look at this pathetic 1/8. Can't even afford decent clothes anymore." Marcus wasn't any better. His latest email read, "Every time I pick up JJ and see you in that dump, I remember why I upgraded. Enjoy playing poor with your cop daddy." How much does Mike charge? I asked, already knowing my answer. 2 days later, I sat in Mike Sullivan's small downtown office. A gruff man with kind eyes, Mike had known me since I was a kid. Weeks passed as I focused on work and JJ, trying to ignore the constant harassment from Marcus and Sophia. Then Mike called. "You need to come to my office," he said. "You're going to want to see this in person." He handed me a thick file. "First off," he began, "Sophia Loren isn't her real name. She's using her sister's identity. Her real name is Carla Larson." My hand trembled as I read through the file. Before working at Reynolds Industries, Sophia had been an escort, hawking from one rich man to the next, living off their money until they grew tired of her or caught onto her scams. She'd used different names in different cities, always disappearing before things got too hot. But what she was doing at Reynolds Industries was far worse. Mike pointed to some bank transfers. "She's been siphoning small amounts from company accounts. Enough to go unnoticed, but it adds up." He flipped through more pages. "And these emails. She's been selling company information to your in-laws' biggest competitors, product launches, merger plans, everything." I sat back, my mind reeling. The perfect, sophisticated Sophia Loren was nothing but a con artist, and she'd sunk her claws not just into my husband but into the entire Reynolds empire. "There's one more thing," Mike said, pulling out another folder. "Remember that big deal Reynolds Industries lost last month? The one that cost them millions? Sophia sold the bid information to their competitor 3 days before the deadline." I gathered all the evidence carefully, making multiple copies. But I didn't act yet. I knew something Sophia didn't. Timing is everything. The call came on a Wednesday morning. "Tasha," Victoria's cold voice said, "James Reynolds' 60th birthday party is this Saturday. You're invited. JJ should be there for his grandfather's birthday. Since he's too young to come alone, you'll need to escort him." She let the sentence hang in the air, her tone dismissive. "Just remember, you're only invited as JJ's escort. Try to stay in the background and not embarrass anyone." James Reynolds' 60th birthday party was every bit as ostentatious as you'd imagine. The mansion gleamed with gold and crystal, waiters carrying champagne on silver trays. I felt every judgmental gaze as JJ and I walked into the room. "Oh, you came," Victoria said, her smile tight. "Well, JJ, darling, come give your grandmother a kiss." I stood awkwardly by the appetizer table, watching my son being paraded around like some prize show pony. The other guests either ignored me or whispered behind their hands. I clutched my large purse, which contained Mike's file, and waited. Then Marcus walked in with Sophia on his arm. She wore a red Valentino dress that probably cost more than my car, diamonds dripping from her ears. "Everyone," Marcus announced, clinking his glass, "I have an announcement to make." He pulled Sophia closer. "I'd like you all to meet my future wife, Sophia Loren. She'll be joining the Reynolds family officially next spring." Victoria rushed forward to embrace her. Finally, a woman worthy of the Reynolds name. Harvard-educated, from a wonderful family, unlike some people, James added, shooting a look at me. Sophia beamed under their attention. "I just feel so blessed to be joining such an esteemed family, and I promise to be the kind of wife Marcus truly deserves." That was my cue. I stood up, hands steady as I pulled out the file. Speaking of what people deserve, I said loudly, I have a few things to share about the future Mrs. Reynolds. Tasha, don't make a scene, Marcus warned. I ignored him, pulling out the first document. Tell me, Sophia, or should I say Carla Larson, how's your sister feeling about you stealing her identity? The color drained from Sophia's face. What is she talking about? Victoria demanded. Oh, did she not mention that she's been living under her sister's ID? I asked, my voice steady. The real Sophia Loren is a school teacher in Minnesota. This woman, I pointed at her, is Carla Larson, former escort and con artist. Sophia shrieked, she's lying. But I was already laying out the evidence, photos, bank statements, police reports. And here's my personal favorite, I said, pulling out more documents. Bank transfers showing how she's been stealing from Reynolds Industries. And look at these emails. She's been selling your company's secrets to Wagner Manufacturing and Collins Corp for months. James Reynolds snatched the papers from my hands. The Wagner deal. The Collins merger. It was you? I can explain, Sophia stammered, backing away from Marcus's thunderous face. The real Carla Larson, I said, savoring the moment, has quite a history. 7 different cities, 7 different wealthy men, 7 different scams. Looks like Reynolds Industries was going to be number 8. The room went deadly quiet as they read through the evidence. Marcus's confusion, Victoria's horror, James's growing rage, and Sophia, her perfect mask cracking as her house of cards came tumbling down. The elegant birthday party dissolved into chaos in minutes. James Reynolds' face turned an alarming shade of purple as he read the documents. Get out, he roared at Sophia, who was still trying to stammer out excuses. Get out of my house before I have you arrested right here. James, darling, she attempted, reaching for his arm. These are all lies. I can explain everything. Explain? He shook the documents at her. Explain how you cost us the Wagner deal. That contract was worth $20 million. And Collins, they were our biggest competitor. And you've been feeding them everything. Victoria, who had been quietly reading through the escort service records, looked up, venom in her eyes. You common prostitute, she hissed. You thought you could con your way into our family. Sophia backed toward the door, her designer heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Marcus, baby, tell them. But Marcus looked like he might be sick, staring at photos of Sophia, or Sophie, with various wealthy men over the years. If you're not off my property in 30 seconds, James said, his voice deadly quiet, I'm calling the police. And trust me, you'll be seeing plenty of our lawyers either way. After Sophia fled, James turned to his son, his voice low with fury. You brought this woman into our company, he said. Gave her access to confidential information, all because what? She was pretty. Had nice legs? Dad, I didn't know. You didn't know. Didn't check. Just thought with your... He glanced at JJ and modified his language. With everything except your brain. You're fired, Marcus. Clear out your office by tomorrow. But Dad, and that apartment you're living in? Company property. Find somewhere else to live. Victoria, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly turned to me. Tasha, she said, and for the first time ever, her voice held genuine emotion. We owe you an apology, a significant one. You saved our company from God knows how much damage. James nodded solemnly. We were wrong about you. Very wrong. You've proven yourself more worthy of the Reynolds name than others. 3 days later, Sophia was arrested at O'Hare, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. The evidence I gathered, combined with what Reynolds Industries lawyers uncovered, was overwhelming. She was facing serious fraud charges and massive fines. Marcus, I heard, was staying at a friend's condo while he looked for a new job. No other financial firms were eager to hire a man who'd been fired for such catastrophic negligence. It's been 6 months since James Reynolds' birthday party changed everything. I'm sitting in my new apartment. It's not as luxurious as the one I shared with Marcus, but it's perfect for JJ and me. The Reynolds family gave it to me as a token of appreciation for saving their company. The least we could do, James had said, handing me the keys. After everything, well, you understand. The apartment is in a nice neighborhood, close to good schools. Jay's room is decorated with superhero posters, and my little home office overlooks a park. It's not a penthouse with lake views, but it feels like home in a way the luxury apartment never did. Marcus moved to California last month. He calls JJ every Sunday at 7:00 p.m. like clockwork. Their conversations are short. JJ is still too young to talk long on the phone, but at least he's trying to be a father, even from a distance. He never asks to speak to me, and that's fine. Some bridges stay burned. The biggest change has been with the Reynolds family. Victoria stops by at least once a week, usually bearing gifts for JJ and surprisingly for me too. Last week, she brought a beautiful orchid for my windowsill. The real shock came when Victoria and James invited my parents over for dinner. I was nervous. The last time they'd all been in the same room was at my wedding, where the class divide had been palpable. But something had shifted. I watched in amazement as James asked Dad about his years on the force, genuinely interested in his stories. Victoria and Mom talked about gardening, exchanging tips on growing roses. Sarah, Victoria said to my mom at the end of the evening, "You and Tom raised a remarkable daughter. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. We always knew what Tasha was capable of." Mom replied with quiet dignity, "Sometimes it just takes others a while to catch up. Life isn't perfect. I still have days when I miss the man I thought Marcus was, when I worry about JJ growing up with a long-distance father. But then I look at my son, happy and healthy, playing with his grandparents, all his grandparents, and I know we're going to be okay." Last night, I found JJ looking at an old photo of Marcus and me from our wedding day. "Do you miss Daddy?" he asked. I sat down next to him, pulling him close. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "But you know what? Life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes it goes wrong before it goes right. The important thing is to stay true to who you are." Later, as I tucked him into bed, I thought about how far we'd come, from the simple accountant the Reynolds family once scorned to the woman who saved their company. Sometimes the happy ending isn't the one you expected. Sometimes it's better,